The brass bell above Beatrice's Maple Street diner chimed, letting in a bitter November chill and the one quiet customer who always slipped a $20 bill under her coffee mug before even taking a sip. Evelyn pushed the heavy glass door shut, her breath pluming in the freezing Connecticut morning air. She wore a thick cream-colored wool sweater that had seen better days, though it was perfectly clean and neatly mended at the elbows. Beside her, navigating the slightly uneven threshold with practiced ease, was 7-year-old Hazel. The little girl's bright red beanie bobbed as she wheeled her chair into the comforting warmth of the diner, her radiant smile instantly lighting up the room. The Maple Street Diner was a Greenwich institution, a sanctuary of cracked vinyl booths and checkered floors that smelled eternally of rich, dark roast coffee, sizzling hickory-smoked bacon, and Beatrice's legendary homemade pecan pies. Frost clung stubbornly to the large front windows, blurring the affluent, fast-paced world outside. Here, time slowed down. Here, people knew your name. "Morning, my favorite girls," Beatrice called out from behind the counter. The diner owner, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair tied in a practical bun and a flour-dusted apron, beamed at them. She wiped her hands on a towel and hurried over to their usual corner booth. "Good morning, Miss B," Hazel chirped, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "Are the pies ready?" "Ready and waiting, sweet pea," Beatrice chuckled, tapping Hazel affectionately on the nose. Evelyn helped Hazel maneuver her wheelchair up to the table, taking a seat across from her. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and their tradition was set in stone. While the rest of the wealthy town was busy stressing over elaborate catered holiday menus or packing for ski trips to Aspen, Evelyn and Hazel spent their morning at the diner. They weren't there just to eat. Stacked neatly on the adjacent table were dozens of small white cardboard boxes. For the next hour, the mother and daughter worked in comfortable harmony with Beatrice, carefully sliding slices of warm pecan pie into the boxes, tying them off with simple red string. These were for the elderly neighbors, the widows and widowers in the community who had no family visiting for the holidays. Evelyn moved with a quiet, humble grace, her hands steady and gentle, while Evelyn drove a rusting 2012 station wagon that rattled in the biting Connecticut wind. Her quiet generosity hinted at a deep, hidden well of resources she kept entirely severed from her wealthy, toxic bloodline. She never spoke of it, and Beatrice, with the wisdom of her years, never pried. Beatrice returned with a heavy porcelain mug, pouring a steaming stream of black filter coffee for Evelyn. "You're a lifesaver, Evie. Arthur over on Elm Street is going to be thrilled. He talks about this pie all year." Evelyn wrapped her hands around the warm mug, a soft, genuine smile gracing her features. "It's the least we can do, Bea. Hazel loves being your little helper." Beatrice poured a splash of fresh cream into a smaller cup of hot cocoa for Hazel before leaning against the edge of the booth, her expression turning slightly sympathetic. "So," the older woman murmured, keeping her voice low, "are you ready for the grand performance tomorrow?" Evelyn's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. She took a slow sip of her coffee, the bitter warmth grounding her. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. Tomorrow meant returning to her parents' lavish, sprawling estate on the other side of town, a place of crystal chandeliers and imported rugs, where the temperature was always freezing, regardless of the thermostat. "I'm managing," Evelyn sighed softly. She glanced at Hazel, who was currently humming a cheerful tune and proudly tying a clumsy but earnest knot on a pie box. "I only tolerate their coldness so she can at least experience a traditional family holiday. Everyone deserves to know their grandparents, Bea. Even if they aren't exactly warm." "You've got a heart of gold, Evie. Just don't let them trample on it," Beatrice said gently, squeezing Evelyn's shoulder before bustling back to the kitchen to check on the oven. Evelyn finished her coffee, the comforting atmosphere of the diner settling into her bones. She pulled a worn leather wallet from her purse, placing the exact amount for their breakfast on the table, and discreetly slipped a crisp $20 bill underneath the heavy ceramic mug. A quiet testament to her appreciation for Beatrice's unwavering kindness. She exchanged warm, familiar small talk with a few of the elderly patrons, wishing them a blessed holiday, before turning to help Hazel with her winter coat. Just as Evelyn was buttoning Hazel's coat, her cell phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She pulled it out, the screen illuminating with a text message from her father, Harrison. Evelyn's heart gave a familiar, anxious thump. She opened the message. The words were a sharp, unprovoked emotional sting that instantly drained the warmth from her chest. Evelyn, when you arrive tomorrow, make sure you park that absolute eyesore of a vehicle near the service entrance. I have important colleagues from the country club arriving, and I won't have them looking at that rust bucket from the main street. Use the back door. Evelyn stared at the glowing screen. There was no happy Thanksgiving, no drive safely in the ice. Just a cold, calculating demand born of pure vanity. The cruelty wasn't new, but it always managed to find a fresh nerve. She looked down at Hazel, who was smiling up at her, completely innocent to the venom that flowed through their family tree. Evelyn quietly pocketed her phone and forced a bright, reassuring smile for her daughter, completely unaware that tomorrow's dinner would permanently sever her ties to that golden cage. Before we head into the cold reality of that Thanksgiving dinner, I want to pause for just a moment. If you're still watching and Evelyn's quiet strength is already touching your heart, please drop a number 8 in the comments below to let me know you're right here with us. And if you haven't joined our community yet, I warmly invite you to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a chapter of these journeys. Your wonderful support is exactly what helps us continue creating these powerful, inspiring stories for you. Now, let's get right back to the story and see what awaits Evelyn and Hazel at the estate. Harrison's sweeping, manicured driveway was a glittering parade of European luxury sedans, making Evelyn's faded station wagon look like a stray dog that had accidentally wandered into a pedigree dog show. The harsh digital words from the previous morning still echoed in Evelyn's mind, a cold and unforgiving reminder of her standing within this family. She dutifully bypassed the grand, illuminated front entrance, steering her rattling vehicle toward the shadowy service driveway at the back of the massive Greenwich estate. The biting Thanksgiving frost nipped at her cheeks as she stepped out into the wind, moving quickly to carefully lift Hazel into her specialized wheelchair. The little girl clutched her favorite sketchbook tightly against her chest, shivering slightly before her mother wrapped a thick, familiar tartan blanket securely over her legs. They entered through the drafty kitchen door, leaving the freezing Connecticut evening behind, and stepped onto the immaculate imported hardwood floors that spanned the sprawling mansion. The air inside the estate was thick, smelling heavily of expensive roasted turkey, rich mahogany polish, and an overwhelming amount of high-end floral perfume that seemed to coat the back of Evelyn's throat. Margaret stood near the grand entryway to the formal dining room, a crystal wine glass pinched delicately between her perfectly manicured fingers. She wore a tailored silk blouse and a string of authentic pearls that undoubtedly cost more than a year of Evelyn's modest rent. Instead of a warm, maternal embrace, Margaret's sharp, calculating eyes immediately darted up and down her daughter's attire. She let out a soft, highly disapproving sigh, her gaze lingering critically on Evelyn's plain, off-the-rack holiday sweater. It was a comfortable garment, but in this house, comfort was a sin if it didn't come with a designer label. Margaret offered no greeting, completely ignoring the cheerful and bright, "Happy Thanksgiving, Grandma," that Hazel offered with an innocent, enthusiastic wave of her mittened hand. Margaret simply turned her back, adjusting a massive floral arrangement on the credenza. Before the awkward, heavy tension could fully settle in the foyer, the heavy oak front doors swung open with a dramatic flourish. Valerie swept into the house, bringing a flurry of cold air and the unmistakable rustle of several heavy designer shopping bags. Evelyn's older sister tossed her expensive cashmere coat to a hired server without looking at him and immediately zeroed in on their father, who was holding court by the roaring stone fireplace in the main living area. "Dad, you are an absolute angel," Valerie gushed loudly, her voice piercing the elegant murmur of the room, ensuring every wealthy guest in the vicinity could hear her declaration. She marched over and kissed his cheek, waving a sleek metallic black card in the air like a trophy. The card worked like an absolute charm for the chalet deposit. "My entire luxury ski trip to Aspen is completely covered. You always know exactly how to spoil your favorite daughter." The concierge was practically bowing when I handed this over. Harrison puffed out his chest, a smug, deeply satisfied smile stretching across his weathered face. He swirled the expensive amber liquid in his heavy crystal rocks glass, patting Valerie's shoulder with paternal pride. He then turned his attention seamlessly back to his elite circle of country club acquaintances, effortlessly transitioning into a boastful, loud monologue about his latest stock portfolios, the exorbitant membership fees at the golf course, and the new boat he was considering purchasing for the summer. Evelyn watched the entire display in total silence from the shadowy fringes of the room, keeping a protective, steady hand on the back grips of Hazel's wheelchair. The little girl, completely unfazed by the opulent, freezing atmosphere of her relatives, had found a quiet corner beneath a massive, glittering crystal chandelier. With her tongue poking out slightly in deep concentration, Hazel was happily using her crayons to draw a colorful, plump turkey on a blank page of her sketchbook. The contrast between the two sisters was stark and deeply unsettling. While Valerie loudly flaunted a lavish lifestyle entirely funded by someone else's generosity, wearing her financial dependence as a badge of honor, Evelyn asked for absolutely nothing, providing a quiet, stable, and deeply loving life for her child. Yet in the twisted logic of this house, visible wealth was the only acceptable metric of human value. After a few more moments of diligent coloring, Hazel proudly held up her finished artwork. Her bright eyes sparkled with genuine accomplishment. She gripped the wheels of her chair and propelled herself forward, navigating through the crowded room toward the warmth of the fireplace where her grandfather stood. "Look, Grandpa," Hazel called out, her sweet, pure voice cutting through the dull roar of elitist conversation and clinking ice cubes. "I drew a turkey for you. Happy Thanksgiving." Harrison barely even glanced down at the brightly colored page. His expression soured immediately, his eyes fixing not on the heartfelt drawing, but on the bottom of the wheelchair resting on his pristine floor. He took a deliberate, almost theatrical step back, raising a hand as if warding off a sudden nuisance. "Margaret," Harrison snapped sharply, his voice carrying an edge loud enough to draw uncomfortable stares from the nearby guests. "Look at this. The rubber tires on that absolute contraption are scuffing the Brazilian hardwood. I just had these floors professionally polished for the holiday. It's a disaster." He completely brushed past his disabled granddaughter without a second thought, leaving little Hazel holding her sketchbook awkwardly in the air, her joyful, radiant smile slowly fading into deep confusion. Evelyn felt a sudden, fierce heat rise in her chest, an instinctual, primal urge to step forward and shield her innocent child from the casual, devastating cruelty of a man who clearly cared far more about wood lacquer than his own flesh and blood. She gripped the handles of the wheelchair, her knuckles turning white, steadying her breathing to maintain her dignity in a room completely devoid of it. Dinner was finally served, but as Evelyn took her secluded seat at the far end of the long mahogany table, the heavy silence in the room felt exactly like the calm before a devastating winter storm. The crystal goblets clinked in a grand toast to family, a word that suddenly tasted like bitter ash in Evelyn's mouth as she watched her father hold court at the head of the table. The earlier tension by the roaring stone fireplace had merely been a prelude. The imaginary blemishes on the imported hardwood floors were nothing compared to the manufactured, cruel grievances the patriarch was about to unleash upon his own blood. The dining room was suffocatingly warm, filled with the low, self-important murmur of Greenwich's elite discussing their winter portfolios and upcoming charity galas. Heavy sterling silver scraped politely against fine bone china as the main courses, herb-roasted turkey, glazed root vegetables, and rich, savory stuffing were efficiently cleared away by silent, uniformed staff, making room for the elaborate dessert spread. Evelyn sat in absolute silence at the far, drafty end of the massive mahogany expanse, her protective gaze never wavering from her daughter. Hazel, despite the previous slight from her grandfather, was happily occupied with a small piece of sweet dinner roll. Her innocent, radiant joy was a stark, almost blinding contrast to the deeply pretentious, hollow atmosphere surrounding them. It happened just as the hired servers brought out the intricately glazed pumpkin tarts and poured fresh cups of expensive after-dinner espresso. Hazel, trying her absolute best to be perfectly well-behaved in the daunting environment, reached across her porcelain plate to adjust her linen napkin. In doing so, her small, uncoordinated hand bumped the base of her heavy crystal water goblet. It tipped over with a dull thud, spilling a small puddle of ice water onto the pristine white tablecloth. It was a completely harmless accident, the kind any 7-year-old child might have on any normal holiday. Yet, Margaret gasped audibly, clutching the authentic pearls at her neck as if she had just witnessed a horrific, unforgivable crime in her own home. The surrounding affluent conversation abruptly died, replaced by an uncomfortable, heavy silence that pressed against the walls. Harrison slammed his napkin onto the table, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson that clashed violently with his tailored suit. He stood up, towering over the exquisite dessert spread, and turned to his wealthy friends with an exasperated, theatrical sigh. "I must deeply apologize to you all for this ridiculous disruption," he announced, his voice booming with a disproportionate, terrifying fury. He gestured dismissively down the length of the table toward his own flesh and blood, his eyes completely devoid of any paternal warmth. One expects a certain level of basic decorum on a holiday, not to be subjected to a charity case at my own dinner table. The words hung in the stagnant air, heavy and venomous. Evelyn's heart pounded against her ribs, but she remained frozen, waiting to see if there was any shred of decent humanity left in the man who raised her. There was not. Harrison sneered, leaning forward, ensuring every guest heard his next devastating sentence. "This entire situation is a sad, embarrassing joke on our perfect family legacy. We try to maintain high standards, but some people simply drag us down into the mud." Across the table, Valerie didn't even attempt to hide her cruel amusement. A sharp snicker escaped from behind her napkin as she took another leisurely sip of expensive wine. Margaret, her face set in a flawless mask of cold annoyance, waved a manicured hand toward the swinging doors of the pantry. "Evelyn, take the child to the kitchen where she belongs immediately. The adults would like to enjoy the rest of our evening in peace without further messy distractions." In that exact moment, a profound, icy clarity washed over the young mother. The years of quiet endurance, of biting her tongue to keep the peace, of desperately hoping her parents would finally learn to love her child, simply vanished into thin air. There would be no crying tonight. There would be, she cared without the quiet, before we join Evelyn as she steps out of that cold door and waits to see what surprises await her the next morning, I want to take a moment to chat with you. If you're still watching this video and feel the resilience and self-respect of a mother protecting her child is truly valuable, please comment with a 1 below to let me know you're here with us. It would be heartwarming if you could leave a meaningful comment or a kind wish for Hazel and Evelyn right now. Also, if you haven't joined our community yet, I sincerely recommend you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming amazing stories. Your support and companionship are a huge motivation for us to continue creating quality content, providing useful information, and inspiring you every day. Now let's see what price Mr. Harrison had to pay the following day. Let's continue. Black Friday morning dawned with the crisp, icy promise of retail therapy. A holiday tradition Harrison and Valerie treated like a highly competitive sport. The bustling streets of downtown Greenwich were adorned with glittering holiday displays, and cheerful jazz music drifted gracefully from hidden speakers mounted on ornate street lamps. However, the brief, determined phone call that had taken place in the freezing shadows of a suburban driveway the previous evening was already quietly setting a devastating trap. It was a silent financial avalanche, ready to thaw out some very harsh, expensive realities for the proud patriarch who believed his empire was untouchable. To Harrison, the bright winter morning was supposed to be a triumphant return to normalcy. He was incredibly eager to wash away the lingering annoyance of the previous night's dinner, treating the sudden departure of his youngest daughter as nothing more than the removal of a minor inconvenience. To restore the family's spirits, he escorted Margaret and Valerie into an exclusive high-end designer boutique, a place where price tags were carefully hidden and champagne was served to browsing clients. The air inside was thick and intoxicating, smelling strongly of fine Italian leather and expensive floral perfumes. Valerie moved through the pristine aisles with predatory grace, her sharp eyes scanning the latest exclusive winter collections. Within mere minutes, she had eagerly draped a breathtakingly soft cashmere coat over her arm and selected a limited edition leather handbag that carried a staggering $5,000 price tag. Margaret stood nearby, nodding in quiet approval, adjusting her authentic pearls as she admired a woven silk scarf. Harrison approached the polished marble register with the effortless, commanding swagger of a man who firmly believed he owned the world. He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored overcoat, his fingers brushing against his premium leather wallet. With a smug, deeply self-satisfied smirk, he produced a heavy, prestigious black titanium credit card, sliding it confidently across the gleaming counter toward the impeccably dressed sales clerk. The young woman offered a polite, highly practiced smile. She took the heavy metal card, swiped it smoothly through the state-of-the-art terminal, and waited for the familiar, comforting chime of approval. Instead, a sharp, flat beep abruptly broke the ambient jazz music playing overhead. The clerk frowned slightly, her manicured finger gently tapping the digital screen. She wiped the magnetic strip against her apron and swiped it a second time. Another flat, unforgiving beep echoed in the quiet space. "I'm sorry, sir, it's been declined," the clerk murmured, her voice lowered discreetly in a desperate attempt to preserve his dignity in front of the other affluent patrons. Harrison's smug expression instantly faltered, quickly replaced by a dark, deeply offended scowl. "That is absolutely impossible," he scoffed loudly, his face flushing a dangerous, uneven shade of crimson that clashed with his expensive attire. "There must be a ridiculous error with your machine. Run it again. Do you have any idea how much I spend here?" When the machine flashed the exact same bold red message, Harrison aggressively pulled out a second platinum card and then a third, his hands beginning to tremble with furious indignation. Swipe after swipe, the result was identically, agonizingly humiliating. The discreet, judgmental murmurs of other wealthy shoppers began to ripple through the quiet boutique, eyes turning to witness the spectacle. Valerie let out a sharp, exasperated sigh, her initial embarrassment rapidly morphing into a public, childish tantrum. She complained loudly and bitterly about the sheer incompetence of the store's management, but her voice wavered as the boutique manager formally approached. With an icy professional politeness that cut deeper than any insult, the manager firmly asked the trio to step aside so actual paying customers could complete their holiday transactions. Stripped of their golden armor, they were forced to exit the store completely empty-handed, their cheeks burning hot in the freezing November wind. Desperate to save face, regain his lost control, and prove his unquestionable financial superiority to himself, Harrison hastily left his furious wife and complaining daughter at a nearby upscale cafe. He drove his luxury sedan straight to the Oakwood Country Club. Today was the designated deadline to pay his $20,000 annual VIP membership dues in person. A lavish, highly visible ritual he usually relished to cement his elite social standing among his peers. He marched confidently into the grand, echoing foyer, his leather shoes clicking sharply against the imported marble tiles, fully expecting the usual chorus of respectful greetings. Instead, the club manager discreetly intercepted him near the concierge desk, his expression incredibly tight. Rather than offering the usual fawning reception, the manager guided the deeply flustered patriarch into a private, mahogany-paneled side office, ensuring the heavy door was firmly closed behind them. Harrison aggressively slapped his titanium card onto the polished desk, loudly demanding his dues be processed immediately to clear up the morning's ridiculous banking nonsense. The manager silently picked up the card, ran it through the club's private, highly encrypted financial system, and let out a heavy, deeply uncomfortable sigh. The club manager politely slid the titanium card back across the mahogany desk, stating softly that the primary account holder had frozen all assets and revoked his access entirely. Harrison stormed out to his luxury sedan to scream at his bank representative, completely oblivious that the primary account holder was the very daughter he had just discarded. The plush leather seats of Harrison's luxury sedan felt less like a throne and more like a suffocating trap as the bank representative's voice echoed through the speakerphone. The engine of the high-end vehicle hummed quietly in the deserted corner of the Oakwood Country Club parking lot, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with rising panic. Harrison violently loosened his expensive silk tie, his breaths coming in short, uneven rasps as the bitter November chill radiated against the tinted windows. "Listen to me very carefully," Harrison growled, leaning closer to the dashboard microphone, his knuckles turning stark white as he gripped the steering wheel. "I am a platinum client. I have maintained accounts with your institution for over 3 decades. You will instantly remove this ridiculous freeze on my titanium card, or I will personally see to it that you are looking for employment by Monday morning." The young customer service representative on the other end of the line did not flinch, maintaining a polite, highly trained, and distinctly robotic corporate monotone. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, sir. However, as I have explained, my system clearly indicates that you are merely an authorized secondary user on the Sterling Family Trust accounts. You do not possess the administrative clearance required to override a financial freeze initiated by the primary account holder." Harrison froze, the blood draining rapidly from his flushed face. The words "secondary user" buzzed in his ears like an angry hornet. "That is utterly absurd," he stammered, his booming confidence finally cracking. "I am the head of this family. I am the patriarch. Who exactly is listed as the supposed primary account holder?" "I am afraid I cannot disclose the primary account holder's personal information without their explicit authorization, sir. Is there anything else I can assist you with today?" Harrison aggressively slammed his finger against the glowing red button on the console, disconnecting the call. His chest heaved. The very daughter he had so cruelly banished to the kitchen the night before, the woman he had publicly humiliated and deemed a charity case, was in reality the silent, unseen architect of the opulent fortress he called his life. He simply refused to believe it. It had to be a catastrophic clerical error. With trembling fingers, he quickly scrolled through his contacts and dialed Elias Thorne. Elias was a Greenwich institution himself, a dignified old-school attorney who had managed the family's legal and financial affairs since Harrison was a young executive. Elias, thank God. Harrison breathed heavily as the line connected. There has been a massive, ridiculous mistake at the bank. My cards are bouncing all over town. I need you to call the wealth management department immediately and sort out this clerical nonsense. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. When Elias finally spoke, his voice was completely devoid of its usual deferential, friendly warmth. It was cold, measured, and strictly professional. It is not a clerical error, Harrison. I strongly suggest you come to my office on Elm Street immediately. We need to discuss a sudden, permanent change in administration. 20 minutes later, Harrison pushed through the heavy glass doors of the prestigious downtown law firm, ignoring the polite greeting of the receptionist as he marched directly toward the back corner office. Elias Thorne's sanctuary smelled of aged paper, lemon furniture polish, and old money. The lawyer, a distinguished man in his late 60s wearing silver-rimmed spectacles, sat behind a massive antique mahogany desk. He did not stand up to greet his client. He did not offer a glass of scotch. Instead, Elias calmly slid a thick, imposing financial ledger across the polished wood surface. "Sit down, Harrison," Elias instructed, his tone leaving absolutely no room for argument. Harrison collapsed into the leather guest chair, his bravado entirely stripped away by the severe atmosphere. "Elias, what is the meaning of this? Why am I being treated like a criminal?" "Fix my accounts." Elias folded his hands neatly over the closed ledger, looking at the arrogant man with a mixture of profound pity and deep, unwavering disappointment. 5 years ago, Harrison, your original logistics firm didn't just experience a minor market stumble. It completely collapsed under the weight of your reckless expansion and poor management. You were weeks away from total catastrophic bankruptcy and foreclosure on the estate. "That's a lie," Harrison hissed, though a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. "My investments." "Your investments were quietly liquidated to cover a fraction of your massive debts." Elias cut him off gently, but with absolute firmness. "The only reason you did not lose the Greenwich estate, the luxury vehicles, and your precious country club status is because an anonymous benefactor stepped in. They purchased your debt in its entirety and established the Sterling Family Trust to maintain your lifestyle, purely to preserve your pride." Harrison stared at the leather-bound book as if it were a venomous snake. His throat was incredibly dry. "Who?" "Evelyn," Elias stated simply, the name dropping like a heavy stone into the quiet room. "Your youngest daughter. While you were busy dismissing her, she quietly built a massive, highly successful e-commerce logistics empire. She funded everything, Harrison. Every single designer handbag Valerie flaunted, every round of golf you played, every piece of imported Brazilian hardwood you demanded be polished. She paid for it all, anonymously, out of a profound sense of familial duty and unconditional love." Harrison was completely speechless, his mouth opening and closing without sound. The realization was a crushing, suffocating weight, shattering decades of carefully constructed arrogance into a million jagged pieces. Elias adjusted his spectacles, his expression hardening into one of resolute justice. "However, as of this morning, following your appalling, unforgivable conduct toward her and young Hazel at Thanksgiving dinner, Evelyn has officially removed you as a beneficiary of the trust. She formally cited a severe, irreconcilable breach of family values. The financial lifeline is permanently severed. Effective immediately, you have zero access to the accounts, and you are entirely, solely responsible for the estate's massive monthly upkeep and property taxes." The heavy oak door of the law firm clicked shut behind him. leaving Harrison standing on the cold autumn pavement with nothing but his shattered pride and the spare change in his pockets. The aroma of Beatrice's fresh cinnamon rolls wrapped around the diner like a warm hug, a stark contrast to the bitter chill settling over the Greenwich estate. While Harrison was left standing on the cold pavement with his shattered ego, Evelyn was finally building a life completely free of his dark, judgmental shadows. The Maple Street Diner was wonderfully alive with the festive, generous spirit of late November. Beatrice hummed a classic, comforting holiday tune as she expertly strung delicate, twinkling fairy lights around the large, frost-covered front windows. Inside this humble establishment, the world felt incredibly safe, grounded, and deeply authentic. Evelyn sat in their usual worn vinyl booth, her hands wrapped around a heavy porcelain mug of black coffee, simply watching her daughter. Hazel was meticulously threading plump popcorn and bright dried cranberries onto a long piece of heavy cotton string, her brow furrowed in delightful concentration. The little girl's laughter bubbled up periodically, pure, innocent, and completely unaffected by the ugly manufactured drama of the previous evening. Here, surrounded by the gentle clatter of silverware and the genuine, affectionate smiles of the diner's elderly regulars, Hazel was cherished exactly as she was. There were no scuff marks to worry about, no judgmental whispers behind linen napkins, and absolutely no impossible standards of superficial perfection to meet. The brass bell above the heavy glass door chimed brightly, admitting a sudden rush of biting winter wind alongside Elias Thorne. The distinguished silver-haired attorney paused on the threshold, methodically dusting a few stray snowflakes from the shoulders of his tailored wool overcoat before approaching the main counter to order his usual beverage. Before taking his seat at a quiet corner table, Elias intentionally caught Evelyn's eye across the bustling room. He offered a slow, deeply respectful nod, a gesture usually reserved for esteemed colleagues. No grand, dramatic announcements were necessary between them. That single, silent movement confirmed that the complex legal paperwork had been flawlessly executed. The financial ties to the Sterling family trust had been officially, permanently severed, and her hard-earned, self-made assets were entirely secure from her family's greedy grasp. A profound, sweeping sense of relief, feeling significantly lighter than the crisp winter air outside, finally settled over Evelyn's tired shoulders. Just as Beatrice bustled over to their booth, presenting a steaming plate of warm, delightfully gooey cinnamon rolls with a grand, theatrical flourish, Evelyn's cell phone vibrated intensely against the tabletop. The digital screen flashed with her father's name. Taking a deep, incredibly steadying breath, Evelyn stood up, gently squeezed Hazel's shoulder with a reassuring smile, and stepped outside the diner into the freezing, biting afternoon wind to answer. "Evelyn!" Harrison's voice came through the small speaker, sounding entirely unrecognizable. Gone was the booming, aggressively arrogant patriarch who had held court at the head of the Thanksgiving table. In his place was a broken, panicked, and deeply desperate man, his tone stripped entirely of its golden, impenetrable armor. "Evelyn, please. You have to undo this right now. Elias just told me everything about the business, the trust, everything. The house, the country club memberships. Margaret is having an absolute breakdown in the foyer. Valerie is furious and threatening to move out. You can't just cut us off like this, Evelyn. I'll lose the entire estate by January." Evelyn leaned her back against the rough red brick wall of the diner, quietly watching her own breath form small white clouds in the freezing air. She searched her heart, expecting to find a spark of vindictive joy or petty, vengeful triumph, but she found absolutely nothing of the sort. She only felt a quiet, resolute, and unshakable peace. "I forgive you, Dad," she said softly, her voice remarkably steady, carrying the weight of a woman who finally understood her own boundless worth. "I forgive you for the incredibly cruel things you said last night about my daughter. but I do that solely for my own peace of mind. The financial boundaries, however, are permanent and non-negotiable. I spent years silently trying to buy your basic affection, desperately hoping you would finally look past your own vanity and see the beautiful, perfect child I see in Hazel. I am completely done paying for your pride. But how are we supposed to live? Harrison pleaded, a raw, humiliating edge of terror bleeding into his voice. You are ruining this family over a simple misunderstanding. I am protecting my family, Evelyn corrected him firmly, her tone leaving absolutely no room for further debate. Learn to deeply appreciate the people you actually have in your life, rather than the expensive things you can buy to impress strangers. Goodbye, Dad. Without waiting for his frantic, inevitable response, she firmly ended the call, sliding the phone deep into the pocket of her heavy winter coat. The exhausting, generational cycle of emotional abuse and highly conditional love was finally, irrevocably broken. She turned the brass handle and walked back inside, instantly enveloped once again by the rich, comforting scent of cinnamon and the joyous, ringing sound of her daughter's innocent laughter. Beatrice was currently holding up a small, vibrant tabletop evergreen tree, steadying the base while Hazel eagerly reached up to decorate the highest branches. As Hazel placed the glittering golden star on top of the little diner tree, Evelyn smiled, finally realizing that true wealth was never held in a bank account, but in the pure, unconditional love shining in her daughter's eyes. Writing Evelyn and Hazel's story was a deeply emotional journey for me. It serves as a gentle yet powerful reminder that the loudest voices in the room are rarely the strongest, and that sharing a bloodline does not give anyone permission to be cruel. Evelyn's quiet grace in the face of her father's absolute humiliation is a beautiful testament to the fierce, protective nature of a mother's love. It teaches us a difficult but necessary truth. Setting firm financial and emotional boundaries isn't an act of malice or revenge. It is a profound, necessary act of self-respect. Evelyn's quiet departure from her father's toxic empire was never an act of revenge, but a necessary declaration of self-worth and protective love. When we bravely strip away the blinding illusions of status and the harshness of snap judgments, we finally open the door to genuine, life-changing compassion. As this journey reminds us, true wealth is never found in the weight of a titanium credit card, but in the unconditional warmth we offer to those who need it most. If Evelyn's courage to reclaim her peace resonated with your heart today, please take a moment to share your own thoughts or experiences in the comments below. To hear